Hello, thank you for joining this program of The Black Family, united by history, restored by storytelling, brought to you by New York Life. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History, in collaboration with Archival Alchemy, presents this national program that highlights the legacy of Black family reunions while encouraging families of all backgrounds to build and renew their own familial traditions and stories. We encourage you to watch the rest of the videos in this series to learn more about oral storytelling, genealogy, and familial archiving. Once you view all of the videos, you could receive a certificate as a family historian from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Today's program brings together an experienced group of genealogy, oral storytelling, and archiving practitioners to explore the many ways we can advance, celebrate, engage, and activate familial memories, legacies, and archives. And now, let's pass it over to our moderator, Joyce Leanne of Archival Alchemy. To learn more about the panelists, please see their bios in the YouTube description.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. We are here on it's August 31st, 2021. We don't know where you are at in the future when you view this, but that's where we are calling. We're calling in from on Zoom, still deep in this pandemic. We give thanks for being here. We thank you for finding your way to this space to join us. We look forward to engaging you in what we hope is a very fruitful and inspiring, moving conversation. There will not be a chat box because we have a very intergenerational star-studded lineup. And so there won't be like a chat, but there will be other opportunities through the feedback forms to engage. There will be, the hashtag. If you want to come through, shout outs to Julia Kaiser, who is helping behind the scenes. If you want to just remind me what that hashtag is, so I could just say it aloud for the people who are watching in whatever time zone and every time frame that they're watching. If they have stuff that they want to engage, to encourage them to be in conversation with us via that hashtag, regardless what time they find themselves entering the chat. But just wanted to do a little bit of that housekeeping. We have an amazing group of people here, myself included. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to pass it over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves. I think we are the best representations of introducing ourselves, and I also don't want to sit here and read long old bios. I think, y'all say what y'all need to say. Let the people know who you are. I am Joyce Leanne. I am inseparably an archivist and an artist. I find my way to do my work that I felt called to do since I've been a little girl. I've been doing this work. I have been an archivist. I have been archiving everything that I am overcoming or have conquered through my art. And the best way that I have found to be able to do and live in my truth and be my full self without compartmentalizing, with being always in pursuit of liberation, is through Archival Alchemy. That is my little baby, my small business, who is in partnership with ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life. And together we have collaborated on creating this program, the Black Family, United by History, Restored by Storytelling. And we would like to give thanks for New York Life for being our sponsors, for really putting the funding behind something that is so amazing, to give us the opportunity to be able to bring these dynamic, resourceful, informative, necessary resources to our people, to remind them to be empowered by who they are, to reunite with their families, and to inspire their generations of their families for years to come. So we give thanks for your support. And that hashtag that I was trying to reach earlier is hashtag Black Family ASALH, ASALH. So that's my introduction. Someone else take it away. I'm gonna go on mute and let y'all go around and introduce yourselves. Let the people know where you are. And I am calling in from New York City. I right now do not know the native land in which I shout outs to our peoples. I do acknowledge that I'm on native land. Now, I don't have that information with me today, but I know that that is a practice that we are doing in the good year of 2021, is remembering what Indigenous lands we are on. So I have failed to prepare to do that today, but I know I'm on Indigenous land and my pronouns are she, her. Okay, there we go. Let's someone else take it away.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Jermaine Dennis. I'm a public librarian in New York City. I'm a young adult librarian, and I've been doing this type of work as far as genealogy for the past 3 years. I've been facilitating workshops, helping people recover their family history and being able to engage in that type of work. And I'm really excited to be a part of this talk with everyone, and I'm ready to get going.
Yes, welcome, Jermaine.
I'll go next. I'm Arianne Edmonds. I'm a fifth generation Angeleno. I would consider my work to be at the intersection of art, civics, and archiving. I founded the Edmonds Project about 6 years ago, where I'm helping to preserve the history and culture of the Black American West. The centerpiece of a lot of my work is our family's newspaper, which started in 1900, called The Liberator, which documented really kind of the formation of the Black Angeleno community. And, you know, I would say that a big part of my mission is to activate archives, to create experiences through, curating exhibitions or public programming, or now online programming because of the life we live in, but to give people the opportunity to have a better understanding around our history and our stories, and bring them to life almost. I'm a newly appointed commissioner for the Los Angeles Public Library, and a Senior Civic Media Fellow at USC Annenberg. And I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on the esteemed journey. We love to see it.
Come on. Joyce has seen me from the beginning, when I had my little scrapbooks and my little pictures of my grandma.
We're going to touch on that in a moment.
Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there.
About journeys, yes. Someone else?
Peace.
Go ahead.
Okay. Peace. My name is Kalia. Kalia Bain. I am 14 years old. I attend a small, predominantly Black school in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a musician, a poet, an aspiring attorney, defense attorney, in criminal justice, and I'm happy to be here. This is a space of amazing people, and I'm glad to share virtual space, but a virtual space with such amazing people. And I hope to learn today and spread my message, my thoughts and opinions, and yeah.
Love it, love it. We love a good intergenerational moment. There's so many different points of perspective that we can draw on for this conversation. So we welcome your voice here. Thank you for being here, sis.
Great. Good evening. My name is Tamara Lanier, and I am the plaintiff in the Lanier v. Harvard reparations lawsuit. My complaint raises very, very delicate issues such as reparations, repatriation and colonialism, sexual exploitation, cultural appropriation, and expropriation. And my case is a case that is unique in that on November 1st of this year, my enslaved ancestors will be appearing before the Massachusetts Supreme Court, petitioning the court for legal redress, which is historic in itself. It forces the question that has rarely been asked, but a very important question as to who owns the rights to the violence of the past. and also raises issue of Black cultural property and the lack of protections thereof. So, and as we talk later, we'll get into some of the legal issues of the case. But most importantly, this case, this Lanier v. Harvard lawsuit, is the outgrowth of an oral history, an almost 200-year-old story told by an African-born man to his children. And generationally, that story has been passed down from a man named Rinty from the Congo, who was brought from the Congo to the United States, to where I sit today, and actually to my children. So that generation beyond me. And so if nothing more, what I hope we leave people with is the value of oral history, the value of sitting down with your elders, talking, hearing the stories, listening, and retaining the information. Because when it comes to truth telling and telling the true history of what happened in this country, that's where you're going to find it. So, I just want to encourage not only the people who are here on this panel with me today, but anyone who listens thereafter. If you have an elder, sit down and talk with that person and learn the true history of this country. Thank you. And I'm very happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Thank you for, really putting the power of storytelling into practice. Like, that's one of the biggest themes. What you just said is what we really want to inspire people through this project. Like, get together, reunite with your family, especially in this time and space where so many of us, I haven't seen my family since February 2020. I have a whole niece that I am dying to meet, trying to find the right time to go and meet her. She just turned 1, so many of us are missing those moments of really being connected to our family in the physical. And just, what does it mean for us to reunite? What does it mean for us to reunite with our family on the ancestral realm? Okay, we want to get there. And so I think when we say this, the Black family united by history, restored by storytelling, let's challenge even the notion of time. Let's get into that Black time where it's not just linear and just confined to a certain kind of space. If anything that this pandemic has shown us is that there's so many other ways that we can communicate and gather. And we really want to show people through this project how powerful it is to reunite, how powerful it is once you do link up, that yes, play them spades, play them dominoes, do the electric slide, roast each other till the song comes up, but also make sure somebody's getting these oral histories and somebody's figuring out who got the records, okay? Making sure y'all are piecing together the things. You got to be working too. Somebody in the family got to be the one. So if you have watched this whole series and got to this point in the videos, you did hopefully found somebody who's the one who's doing the oral storytelling, who got they family search and ancestry accounts, and they doing all of that. And somebody like, y'all need an Arianne who's out in y'all's family. Look at this right here, real time, who said, I'm going to take care of these records. And y'all going to learn. Y'all going to learn something about people who's the chosen one. Now, listen, you got to also know your role. I'm not the one. I'm not that one in my family to be the genealogy, but I got you on the record keeping. I got you. If we need a program made for a service, come to me. I got some photos, but I can't tell you about no genealogy. I can, but you know what I'm saying? We all have to know what our role is in the family, but that is so important when we do come together that we really, really honor our time and make the most use of it. And that's so much of what this project is about. So we really appreciate you highlighting that. And so the other thing that I want to say before we get into the moderated part of our conversation is that the topic of this panel discussion is, you gathered your family history. So if you are being tuned into the fullness that this project has to offer, we're walking you through all of the skills you need. You will learn how to do primary genealogical research. You will learn basic archiving skills. You will learn how to conduct oral storytelling. You will learn these skills, and you can get a certificate program. Shout out again to New York Life for sponsoring us to provide this resource to you all. But if you've gotten to this point, we didn't want you to just gather all of this and it just sits there. Like Arianne said, like, we are really invested, a lot of us in this space, on activating what we find, on making those stories, keeping those stories alive, if that's through justice and truth telling, if that's through the arts, if whatever you feel called, wherever your family story takes you on that journey, like, for us to show you that, so the title is You Gathered Your Family History. Now what do you do with it? And what we've gathered here, these amazing beings on the screen with me, is all the different ways that people have been enacting their records and their stories into the world. And the other thing that I wanted to, the discussion is going to be about the varying ways that you can advance, celebrate, engage, and activate familial memories, legacies, and archives. That's what we're here to show you. And before I let everyone take it away, I have some moderated questions. We're going to have a moderated discussion. So there's some questions for each of our panelists, just so that way, in lieu of a PowerPoint and a rushed version of their dynamic stories, like the Lanier story, really, I've seen the unfiltered, nearly 2-hour version of the story. I couldn't ask you to do the 10-minute version. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But there are so many, and I hope in the workbook, maybe if there's links to other spaces where you have shared the story in fuller, I think that it's worth someone sitting at your feet, regardless if that's virtual, physically or whatever, but to really hear your story in its fullness. So what we have are some questions prepared for you all that help to illuminate what we know about you, also that our audience can learn those things about you. But before we get into that, I wanted to comment on the connectivity and overlaps that are happening in this Zoom room. Something that you will find when you take on this kind of work is that you start to realize you find yourself in a community of practice, and it just happens organically. You just start doing it, and next thing you know, you have built a family of people. And we as Black, we take this serious. Like, when I say my Weeksville family, I means it, okay? We rise for each other. Like, we hold each other down. We're there, and it's not even, sometimes it's beyond work. If we're in this industry, tend to be very white. We can be support for each other. So there's a community that we built around this, and there's like this language community of practice that is utilized a lot in this realm. And I think that is really evident here. Just to highlight some of that, myself and Arianne go way back to our like baby journeys and of like the professionalism of our work. I feel our stories mirror so much, and that we've been doing this work since we were younger. And that, I think, Tamara, you also have been doing this work for so long as well. But I remember we linked up in 2013 for a little thing at the Schomburg Center called the Finding Aid, Black Women at the Intersection of Art and Archiving. Shout outs to all of our participants. I had co-curated that with Camilla Rashid. We came together. Arianne was one of the people that we invited into the space because we saw that so many of these young Black women were in conversation with our work. So we go way back, and it's been amazing to see you go to do the intro you gave today. You're like, I'm running stuff SUTF because we got intergenerational going on here. We out here running stuff in LA, okay, running it. Like, what you doing what at LA? What? Can you tell the people again what your title is?
So I've just been newly appointed one of the commissioners. There's just 4 of us, so we're on the board for the library. We're appointed by the mayor to kind of come up with, to advise essentially on the strategies for our 72 libraries in LA. It's a big responsibility and I don't take it lightly. One of my major focuses is really on how we care for our archives and how to kind of democratize it a little bit and make sure that community archives are also getting the weight and the support and the love that they deserve. So that's not for all the commissioners, but that's one of my personal charges. So yeah, that's one of the new things.
I mean, that is amazing to just know. I'm like, what? It's amazing to see like what you've done with your family's papers it's just amazing to see your journey. And so we've continued to stay in conversation. And I mean, you continue to affirm and fuel my work. There's conversations we have in private on Instagram that means so much to me that I, take this moment publicly to say, girl, thank you, because you me life. And so we encourage each other. This work is not for the faint of hearts. Sometimes, I mean, the Laniers are just, wow, like y'all's just perseverance is really inspiring. And I think it's beautiful that we encourage each other to keep going, to keep doing this work. That, I heard your story, in Austin and was moved to tears. And I have any place that I've been where I've had an opportunity to give you some space to speak, I have advocated for you to be here. And then we've created a dynamic relationship now because of that, and Jermaine, we go back, Weeksville family through and through, that thick, Black blood that we got going on from Weeksville. You are an amazing, I can't wait for you to learn more about your journey, but you came in, through one of my client Weeksville Heritage Center when I work on the Legacy Project. You were there as an intern. You graduated. You have a great job at NYPL, or if I don't know if is that?
Yeah, well, it's all right. Yeah, I'm a young adult librarian at the New York Public Library. It's fine.
Yeah, but you're doing amazing things there. And then you've come back to speak on panels at Weeksville. You've come back to teach workshops, one of which you've taught a workshop that Kalia was a part of a program at Weeksville, building on a legacy. So there's just so much. And then Kalia, I think we see you in that space. And we were floored by the young people's definition of legacy, which Kalia will be providing for us in a moment. But it was we can't keep this brilliance to ourselves in this workshop. We got to amplify these young voices and give these young people spaces to speak, because wow, I can't even articulate legacy the way that they did. And so I love that, us, sis, little sis, our connection that continues to be fostered around this work and putting you in spaces to continue to share. So this is what, community of practice means to us. We look out for each other. So we continue, bless you, we continue to give each other opportunities and remind each other and affirm each other's work, because it is not easy to do the healing, liberatory, transformative, truth to power work that is, the Black family history. And so I'm really, really grateful that we find ourselves in this mix, and that you all now, who knows how the community will shape shift from you all linking up today. So, all right, let's get into it. That just wanted to give that context. So, Kalia, I want you to, and while when I'm not speaking, if everybody else too puts themselves on mute when we're not speaking, but Kalia, I wanted to start off by asking you, what legacy means to you. As I didn't bend you up, so I know you're gonna blush. What does legacy mean to you? And the other part of that question is comment on how the legacy of your family influences and inspires your interests and goals. Me knowing who you are and knowing more about your family, I see that. And when you introduce yourself and say what you want to do in the world, And like, what's your significance in doing this work? Yes, maybe your parents might have said, you should go to this program, but I have a feeling you chose that for yourself, that opportunity for yourself. And so I would love for you to talk about those three things. And I know you got that paper, so if you forget, you know that we're on point 1 in the bullet point, okay?
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kalia again. Legacy. It's a heavy topic. To me, legacy, in a nutshell, is just power. The power that legacy has is undermined, but it is really important. And I think over the past, what has it been, a year? Almost a year in a couple months, when I first was introduced to Sister Joyce and Weeksville and Jermaine and people who were leading me in the program of the Legacy Project, learning about who I am, whose I am, and why I'm here, what my purpose is in connection to my ancestry and things like that. So to sum it up, legacy is power. The power, the ability to, share and pass down beliefs, traditions, ideas, morals, principles, etc., is powerful. I come from a strong tree. My roots are amazing. The stories that I've heard that my grandmother tells me, the brief time I had with my great grandmother, I think I was about 9 years old or 8 years old when she passed. But the stories that I heard from her about, my roots, I'm half Trinidadian. It's a small island in the Caribbean. And my mother is Puerto Rican and Dominican. So I have, roots in different parts of the Caribbean. But yeah, just listening to the stories, again, the oral history that we failed to, a lot of us as people of color failed to, grasp and appreciate. So definitely legacy to me is power. My father is a violence interrupter. A serial social entrepreneur, as he would correct me, because he has multiple businesses, a nonprofit, a consulting firm. My mother has a law firm. She has an all woman of color law firm, one of the only ones in the world. But yeah, she has an all woman of color law firm. They practice matrimonial, immigration, things like that. And then my father goes into communities. Literally, I've heard stories and witnessed on video him going between two people with guns and we good. Two people with guns and be like, yo, chill. And everything. That's my father. My mother does the corporate legal side of it. So my aspiration to be a criminal defense attorney birthed out of both of them. My mother's drive in her law work and my father's drive and, hands-on in the community, making a difference. So that's for me what legacy is. And I use my parents as role models. They're just people I look up to and I see and I'll be like, I want to be like that. I want to have that impact. Being able to have, an all woman of color firm, passing the bar, all of that, it blows my mind. So, yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes, you are so fortunate. And I mean, but it's beautiful to see that with the gifts that you have of just such, like you said, such a strong tree that you come from, to see what's so refreshing about you is how serious you take your opportunities like that. I mean, you really show up with just like, wow, like you don't take any of it for granted. And that's really beautiful. And so why did you choose to and that maybe goes into the second question around like your experience with building on a legacy, like what brought you to that program? And if you can tell us more about that experience and how you tied that into your art practice, because you created a whole song and a video. Let the people know.
So the initially, the program was presented to me by one of my mentors at my school, who's also my uncle, my family. His name is Prolific. I know he's gonna be happy I said his name when he sees this. But yeah, that's my family. And he presented it as a program. As soon as I heard the word legacy, building on a legacy, that whole phrase just drew my attention. Because one thing I always say is that the only way that we can move forward and progress as a people is if we understand our past and where we come from. We can't address issues and problems if we don't look at the root and the cause of it. And I think that understanding where I come from and who I come from and the power of the people that created me is really important. So that was the initial response when I heard the phrase, the title of the Weeksville program. But yeah, definitely. As soon as I heard that, I was all in, hands and feet. And I was excited. And then I met the people that were guiding me and leading me in the journey of learning. And I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be at, right here. So yeah, it was dope to meet people, especially people of color, because we don't get that enough. So that could, teach me. Like, that's really what y'all did. Y'all taught me, which I didn't really think was possible. And I think you taught me, I learned how to like delve deep into who I am. And it kind of opened a lot of doors for me mentally. So that was helpful. Our program was based around learning about our ancestry. And so we ended up doing a video collage of different art forms. I'm a musician, as I mentioned previously. I write my own music. I'm a singer, songwriter. I like to do poetry sometimes and spoken word. So I did end up making a song about my mother's impact on my life. I connected her to the metaphor of a phoenix, which is a mythical bird that when it burns into ashes and then it comes back to life, brighter. And that's really what I think my mother means to me. Just her, growing up in poverty, and without many resources, without really a family, stable household, to come out so much brighter and stronger than everybody assumed was the metaphor that I addressed during the finale of that program. I think that I kind of left a mark. That's why I'm here today. But I hope I did. But yeah, I left a mark, with my music, and also with, the way that I organizing events has always been super like dope for me to do. Like, I love being around people who are strong-minded, like-minded like me. So Sister Joyce definitely made me see that I had an impact, and that made my day. And I'm here now. So yeah, so that was my participation in that program is memorable for me. I still keep in contact with a lot of the young people that I met during that program. We still hit each other up and talk about it, because I think it left an impact on our lives. And hopefully, I continue to do programs like that so that I learn more and more. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Jermaine. Okay. Make a note for the donors. Okay. Shout out for the live feedback on knowing that we bring the young folks together and that y'all are still connecting. That is just makes me feel over the moon about that. That is amazing. But what I really loved about what you all did was show, and why I wanted you to be here today is showing that like you can create art, you can take all of this, you can take what you're experiencing, and I do this in my own practice, but that you can make sense of your stories through your art, that influence and impact your mother has had on your life, that you have a song for that. And now that was going to go, and you also learned how to take care of that record, right? So that way that song and the record of it goes through time, and then that's now a part of your family's legacy too. And it talks about the history of your mom, and that's something that can be passed down now, that even through our art. So there's like, I think what Tamara, you were saying about the power of the oral storytelling, and like being able to, we don't always have to depend on the written word. It's mighty. And there's writers in the room, there's, you know, families of newspaper people in the room, but there's also just us understanding that there's so many dynamic ways that we can be preserving our stories. And I love that you've put that in a song. The other thing I want you to talk about that I think relates to, because the thing that you blew me away with was you was coming to the workshop being like, so how much time is each of us gonna have? What are we doing here? When are we having tech? And I'm like, oh, do you want to help? So you want to be put to work because you're interested in production. As you know, you weren't interested in just being told, show up here with this thing. You were like, well, how much time do we have? And where are we doing this? And how is everybody's stuff gonna tie together? What's the order? And I said, well, how about you do that? Listen, and I don't have the time to micromanage. So I'm gonna just trust that you gonna do it. And you did. You helped think through the sequencing of y'all's part of the Sensing History program. You did do the intro. You did do the closing. You did pull everybody together and create a little collage of y'all's voices defining legacy. You did that. Shout outs to you. So yes, that's why you here, because you be really doing the work. But I think that what I also saw, and what it was powerful to see when you give a young person those opportunities, and not to, you know, like, I don't know, I treat you like, I could see, yes, you're still a young woman, but that you have the ability to just do those things, and to just give you the space to do them, and to give you that freedom, you know, I mean, but you did show that I could trust you with that responsibility. But I think that that's beautiful then from after that to see what you've been doing in programming. So I would really love for you to talk about the Blackout Collective Revival, and how that's another form of like that oral story that's been passed down, and what you're doing with that, and how it's continuing to you growing as a like curator of programming.
So a little backstory on the Blackout Arts Collective. It was started in the 90s by my father and his brothers, his biological brothers, and those that are not biological, who I still consider my uncles to this day. It was started, and it kind of came out of multiple schools. My father was attending LIU, and he went to Brooklyn College too for a couple semesters. Excuse me for the noise. I live in New York. So anyways, yeah. So it was started in the 90s by my uncles and my father. It was a collective of artists, point blank period. But, you know, it had singers, rappers, hip hop artists, as they call them. Who else? We had poets, spoken word artists, dancers, steppers, like just artists. It was a safe space for artists, specifically of color, to, you know, express themselves. And I think now we do not have enough of those spaces. We don't have enough of spaces where artists can share their art freely without feeling judged or uncomfortable or awkward or anything like that. And I grew up in a house where art was, you know, it was applauded. It was praised, because what art means to me is just expression. And so when I sing a song that I wrote, or when I sing a song that somebody else wrote, either way, I'm expressing myself with the way that it's addressed in. So that's definitely something that came into my head when I started high school last year. And the school that I go to was founded by one of the founders of the Blackout Arts Collective, one of my uncles. And I was like, you know, I want a choir club. We were talking about, you know, creating clubs. I was like, oh, and I went to my dad and I was like, yo, I'm thinking about making a choir club. And he was like, the Blackout. And I was like, what? And so he sat down with me for a good 3 hours. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. It was 3 hours of him sitting there telling me, so back in the 90s. And I was like, okay, that's a long time ago. He was like trying to call me old. I was like, no, but that's a long time ago. So then he's sitting there explaining to me, the process, how it started, how it, went to NYU, how Lauryn Hill was a part of it, things like that. And I was like, that's it. That's what I need. I need that. I need a collective of artists. And that's what I did. I created it. I revived it at my school. We're actually having a blackout. Is it this month? This month in a couple hours. September 17th is going to be in person. You'll probably catch it on social media. But yeah, so that's the blackout. The blackout, the name came from the fact that when the lights go out in the city, like if there's a blackout and there's no electricity, we have the power. We have the power to destroy, to go in, break into stores and riot, or we have the power to create and come together, get candles. We have the power. That was the point, is that when there's a blackout, the people, there's no internet, there's no, dispatchers, there's nothing like that. We have ourselves. And we, depending on how we use that power, and back to the idea of legacy, is that we have the power. And so Blackout at my school brought together the artists who, a lot of times we find artists, young artists specifically, that are shy or uncomfortable with sharing their voice or their art or their dance or, visual art, graphic design. There's space for all of that. So that was the revival. We've had a virtual show that was very successful. Over 100 people came through. It was great. I organized it and moderated it. And so hope to see y'all at the next one. But yeah, that's Blackout for everybody.
Yes, thank you for the work that you're doing, and you do way more of the work than that you even list there. I also know you was helping them make the videos and help them, offering support for some of the art and sequencing. Like, you be really going off, and so we appreciate you being a young leader. And I didn't know that about the meaning of the collective. I know I've heard the name through you. And shout outs to Brother Prolific, who's also in our community of practice and is also a part of this project. You will be learning Genealogy 101 from Prolific. But yeah, I know I've heard the name, but just that description you provided is so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I think we're gonna, we're gonna travel over to Jermaine, who, we already talked about the connectivity between Kalia and Jermaine. And so Jermaine, I am curious, because I just want to know, curious minds are wondering, how did you get into this career? I feel like this career chooses most of us, because it's not
definitely
you just be like, I just want to be a librarian. So how did you get into this work? What fuels it? And just how did you get involved in just give us, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah. But before I even get into that, I think Kalia's story definitely encapsulates exactly what we were talking about earlier about how legacy can actually embolden the youth. And a part of the reason why, I do this work and it's particularly focused on the youth is because you see the difference of how a person like Kalia, who's already dynamic, who's already full of brazen and full of life, to even be more emboldened with her work and being able to embrace her family, embrace her family history. So I think her speaking on her story just really encapsulates that. And I just wanted to highlight that for sure. For me, how I started, you're right. You're absolutely right. This career chose me. I didn't choose it. I actually went to school to be a journalist. I wanted to be a sports journalist, yeah, exactly. You see where we've both been pulled in the same direction. And so what happened was, I was actually a sports reporter for 2 years. and I recognized that the industry was in dire straits. It wasn't growing. There was hard opportunities to grow within it. And so I literally Googled, what can I do with my journalism degree? And then librarian came up, whatnot. So I started applying to work at the library, just in hopes of just being able to, because I knew the library I work at today, they help paid for my master's. So I was like, okay, well, let me work at a place that will help pay for my master's. I actually wanted to become a historian, but in the process of working in the library, I started to see how I had a great impact on the youth and on the individuals that work. I mean, that, you know, in the community or whatnot. And and as you spoke a little bit to me about earlier, I'm really big on supporting and serving the Black community. So that was just, you know, the takeoff for me to start to go back to school and earn my master's in library science and history, which I, you know, was able to get paid for. Thank you, NYPL. I appreciate that. Yeah, and you said, how did I get to this work? So honestly, I got to this work by just being interested in my own family history, right? Like there's that overarching question that most of us try to answer: where in Africa do our ancestors originate from? And so when I had heard about the opportunity to be a part of a workshop to learn how to do genealogical research, I jumped at it. Once I did it and started to do my research, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find that. And I know a lot of people, that's like one of their primary goals is like, I need to know where in Africa so I can learn my heritage, learn my culture. But in the midst of that, you know, that research, it really dawned on me as far as having the conversations with family, relatives, being in community with those who actually know the history, to really understand, like, you know, finding out where I come from in Africa, it would be cool if I would know that, but there's so much rich information about my family that I did not know of. And it drew us together, and it did something for me as far as creating me to be, making me to become more of an empath for my family and the you know, the triumphs that they've, you know, achieved and the traumas that they've went through, to be able to understand, like, you know, wow, like when I growing up, used to be so frustrated with certain things, but just understanding that history of where we come from is like, okay, I have more sympathy. I have more empathy for my ancestors, and understanding where we've come from, and made me really truly appreciate them. And then also, you know, the work for me, what it does is it takes us away from that, you know, monolithic scope of how Black folks are in America, and it really focuses you on, like, what is your history? You know, one of the things I found out is for myself was that my ancestors were they were more dealing with tobacco plantations. They didn't deal with cotton plantations, which you will find a lot in the Carolinas. And so that narrative of, you know, my ancestors picking cotton, it just completely went out the window. Like, well, that wasn't my history, right? So like really coming into focus of what your family is, and then learning that history can definitely bring to life, you know, what is important, and then being able to appreciate where you are at this moment in time, for sure.
Yes, I love that tobacco story, because it is true. It's like, it's nuances when you start going deeper. You start finding there's some nuances, honey. It's
Right.
not a monolith. And then, like, I think you touched on this, but what is if you just want to, if there's anything else you want to expound upon with the significance of you doing this work, specifically being a young person, you know, being a young person librarian, like teaching, like being one of our workshop facilitators for building on a legacy. I think you know, there's a approach and there's a way to doing that. And so if you want to share about just like, how do you approach that work? I think we've talked about why you do, but like, what is your approaches to that? Because I think that everybody doesn't approach it the same way. And your approach has inspired me. So.
Yeah. So I'm going to quote Kalia, because she's dropping a lot of gems on us earlier. So I was like, hold on, let me write this down. Let me jot it. So she said, the only way we can progress as a people is to understand our past, right? And so I want to also connect how her quote right there connects to Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is the founder of this illustrious organization. He wrote, "The conditions of today have been determined by what has taken place in the past." So it's interesting how Kalia just hit us with a gem, and she's connecting right to Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his history and his legacy of why we're even gathering today, right? But the way I go about it is really to bring into focus as it being, again, it's always interesting to find out where we come from as far as like on the continent, right? But then also I'm thinking about more of the healing that needs to be done for us to be able to move forward as a people. And so exactly speaking to what Kalia had mentioned earlier. And so what I want to do when I do the workshops is really get people to focus on the stories and being able to really, as like in my own story, like I said, to become an empath, to really understand the triumphs in your families and the traumas in your families to be able to move forward. My process is very simple with the teens or tweens or even with adults. It's literally trying to get them to understand first what genealogy is, right? A lot of us have a misconception of what it may be, what it means, or whatnot, and then having a conversation of, well, how much, let's assess, how much do you actually know about your family history? And a lot of people find themselves like, I know there's a little bit of something. I might have Cherokee somewhere in my family or whatnot. And, you always have these type of things that come up. And for me, it was just getting people to understand actually where they come from, right? Not just a guesstimation, but really doing the work and trying to understand that. And then after being able to get to that part of, trying to assess, I give them the tools, right? I give them a family tree to start to write out. I give them the worksheets to start to jot and note. And then I do basically a workshop on showing them how to use free resources like familysearch.org, or if you have a library card, there's certain library institutions that have access to the library edition of Ancestry.com. So you don't have to come out of pocket if you just go to your public library and sign up with your library card. I want people to know that. All right, the library is still living and breathing and very strong and it's here for the community. And so once you give these people the tools and you try to guide them, it's so interesting when people come back and say to me that, they bring back the messages of, if I only knew this if I was younger. I would have had so much more grace on my grandparents. I would have had so much grace on my ancestors. If I only knew, the past that my family has come from, I would have, I wouldn't have sold. What I'm saying? I would have wore it with pride and joy. And so, primarily that's mostly my focus is really to get people to, look inwardly for their pride, their self-esteem, their self-worth, through their family and being able to understand what it means to be not just Black in America, but for me, what it means to be a McGee in America or a Fuller in America or, a Dennis in Jamaica. It's definitely broadens your scope and helps you really be able to appreciate where you come from.
Sheesh. I'm just gonna say yes, snappity snaps, all of that, cosign, 100 emojis. And I'm gonna go to your next question so we could just keep moving along because I would love for you all to be able to engage each other. And I'm just trying to be mindful of our time, but Jermaine, so much. I mean, you just always come with the heat. So I just am not surprised. And the other thing that I wanted you, speaking of Carter G. Woodson, can you talk about, because I think the way that was like, okay, now that you've gathered this family history and like, you found this path found you and you've taken a real passion to doing this work, but I think that you've also found a way of taking that and not just doing it it's in a professionalism. I think we both do that where we're like, okay, we're going to share our skills with people. But I think I'm seeing you do something else now. I'm seeing you also finding your voice in like curation or in projects, you know, and so I really would love for you to highlight the Woodson Project that you're working on and this title, which I really am digging, From Negro Past to Afro Futures. Like, can you talk to us a bit about those two projects and how it kind of relates to this theme?
So, you know, overall, the theme for those two projects is just information and what it does to people when they become informed, right? So the Woodson Project was primarily started by myself. I work at the New York Public Library. I reached out to all of the frontline staff who felt compelled to want to do a particular project that focused on Black folks and being able to provide them equitable services, not only during Black History Month. As we all know, Dr. Carter G. Woodson started Negro History Week, and then obviously in 1970s, it grows to what we know as Black History Month. But using our platform, using our skill set to actually provide those information needs, particularly to the Black community, and focusing on them, right? Far too often, sometimes we feel in a DEIA type of a world, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, we want to provide the service for everyone. And that's absolutely correct. But then, you know, we also, in the midst of that, a lot of people still get lost in the weeds, as you would say. So that was where, you know, I had asked just freely anyone in the frontline staff at the New York Public Library if they wanted to be a part of it. And it grew massively. So much support came behind it, and so many people, where we created book lists, we've created programs where we actually spoke about how to document your genealogical research and how to go about doing that research. We also provided just family literacy programs and teach parents how to engage with children when it comes to reading and how to make it fun and engaging and really, basically, it encompasses so many different type of services and resources that I really can't speak all of it at one time. But and then as far as the let me make sure that I don't botch this title. It's From Negroes Past to Afro Futures, I believe. And I actually was a co-curator with Dr. Cooper Owens, Deidre Cooper Owens, who is the program director for African American history programs at the Library Company of Philadelphia. And basically what we were trying to do with the exhibition is just highlight how Black folks have tried to carve out their history and carve out looking forward into the future as far as what they would like to envision to live in America in the midst of, slavery, Jim Crow era, everything that was going on, Reconstruction. So it was just an encompassing of all different types of histories and I was mainly a part of the political history aspect, just highlighting that, that lineage of political theorists within the Black political thought to kind of bring that forth or whatnot. And this is all, so how does this all kind of come together is really informed, right? So when you become aware of this information and you read it, you digest it, as Black folks, we become more emboldened, right? We become more satisfied with our history, because the history that we learn in high school, K through 12, isn't the history that best reflects what we've been through. And so, yeah, that's pretty much how that all kind of comes together.
I love it. And what I love, and I think in our resource book, maybe you could share links to or more information on those projects. But what I love about what you're doing is so oftentimes so much of that kind of work is relegated to the research libraries, and is put behind these kind of invisible gates in academic libraries and research libraries. And what I love about what you're doing is you be up in the Bronx at the branch library doing the work. It is amazing to me because so many times that's what I say I love about your approach to the work is you often think about those people that can get lost in the cracks where it's like, oh, are they a scholar or are they actively writing and doing this? It's like, no, but they should still have access to amazing resources. And I love that you help to, we lost Kalia. We'll see if she's going to come on back.
Joyce, as you was talking about that, you just made me remember, yes, that's a part of the work that Dr. Carter G. Woodson was doing too, right? Like his research, his scholarship, yes, other scholars were reading it, they were appreciating it, but he wanted to get back to the people who needed it the most, and which were the common folks, right? Those who really didn't understand the history. And so that's a part of, I take on that type of, his work inspires me to do that type of work where you focus on not just those who are in academia or research or scholars, but those who don't normally get the opportunity to come face to face with the archives, right? And once they have that opportunity to embrace it, they realize, and all these archives and institutions, they're free to access, right? So we have to get people to really, we have to allow people to really understand that these collections are really there for them too, not just for, a doctorate or, whomever, so I just wanted to highlight that.
Yes, come on. We love a connection, tying it back to our hosting organization. We love to see it.
Absolutely.
Shout outs to ASALH, shout out to the legacy of Carter G. Woodson. And just thank you for the work that you do. You really inspire my fam. I really, really respect what you do out in this world. Tamara, let's move over to you and I think there's also just showing, even I think Jermaine, you set us up as a good segue in taking it out of the academic libraries, but then taking it back there in a different kind of way. And so I really wanted to start. There's one of the questions I have for you that when we spoke on the phone about this, I was telling you how amazing what you had articulated really grasped at exactly what we mean by the title of this project. And so I would really love for you to talk about how your familial history and your family's tradition. I mean, I don't know anybody's family storytelling tradition that is really coming to bat with y'all's it could be a workshop in how to really do this over generations. So how does that tradition of storytelling illuminate what we mean by this title, like the Black family united by history, restored by storytelling? I really loved the way you had articulated that on the call, that I just wanted the people to hear it too. You're on mute, darling.
I've talked so much to so many people. I apologize, but I don't remember exactly what we may have said. But what comes to mind is this. I'm reminded of Frederick Douglass's autobiography he wrote in 1845, where he said, "Genealogical trees do not flourish among slaves." And I saw that as a painful reminder and a prophetic message of the generational harm caused by slavery. Because in 1845, he could look at what was happening and ascribe to that where we are today, trapped where we can't trace back and explore and discover our ancestors in the way that our white counterparts do. I recently had a friend share with me that he had traced his ancestors back to the 1600s, and I thought that was great. But in that same moment, I was saddened that if I get back, for most people of color, if they trace back to 1915, the 1900s, they're lucky, because slavery was designed to destroy the Black family. That was the purpose. and it was successful. And so all that we have, all that we know is the oral history. And our ancestors knew this, and this is why it was so important to us. Like my mother would say to me, as it was said to her, always remember, we're Taylors, not Thompsons. Always remember, you're African and you're Indian. These are words that my mother would say to me throughout my childhood, throughout my adult life, and on her dying deathbed. It was that important to her. And the story of our oral history is a stubborn story that persists and it perseveres throughout all of the obstacles. When I look back at what my mom shared with me as to what our oral history was, now mind you, I'm talking, pre-ancestry.com, pre-23andMe, pre-internet. My mom laid out a roadmap that I followed from what she said back to my African-born enslaved grandfather, Papa Renti. And it was as accurate as if it was a government document. And so, but that's the importance of an oral history. And that's the importance of the stories that are generationally told. Because when we look at, this December, I'll be 59 years old. I majored in college. One of my majors was history, but I am just learning the history of this country, despite everything I've been taught. But the one thing I am learning is that the oral history of what slavery was and how it was to our enslaved ancestors is more accurate than what we're being taught in the history books. So in every generation, there is a keeper of the family history, a keeper of the family story. In my family, it's no different. There was that one person, that one child that would listen attentively, and you may have 6 or 7 others that were there, but it kind of went over their head. I often remark with my cousin, who she lives in New York. She spent more time with my mom because my mom actually raised her. But I'm like, don't you remember, what was, mama like or papa like or whatever? I don't remember, and like for the holidays when the family is all together and the elders are sitting around talking and reflecting and remembering, I'm like, don't you remember when this was said? I don't remember. But there's one person who takes on the burden of being the keeper of the story. And it is a burden in that we can't trust history books to tell it. It has to be told from the perspective of the impacted people. And so, for me, my journey, my oral history is not just my history, it's the African-American history and experience, which I have been blessed. And I count it a blessing, because when I think about the impossibilities of a stubborn and persistent story, lasting or spanning 5 generations, 200 years, with the accuracy that, like I said, more efficient and accurate than government documents, I'm amazed. But, I often say that this is a purpose-driven story, and it persists because there is a reason, there's a need. And then we talk in a larger scale about the case. But, again, the importance of the oral history cannot be understated or overstated, in the sense that it is all we have. And it is not anything that we can count or look to a book written by someone. I like to embrace this African proverb because it kind of encapsulates what we talk about in terms of how we tell our stories. And it is until the lion has its own historian, the glory of the history, the glory of the hunt will always celebrate and I'm messing it up, but I'm sure you've all have heard that proverb. But the bottom line is we have to take back the narratives of telling our stories, of telling our legacies, of telling our histories. When you look at history departments today, when you look at universities in the Afro-American Studies programs, you don't see people like us telling our stories. My battle is with Harvard because they want to control my narrative. They want to tell my story in a way that they see fit. And I'm like, that's not happening, because my oral history, the legacy of this man, is too important for you to screw up. You are not telling my story. So, again, the one thing that, I can impress upon, the people here and on this panel and anyone listening in any future date is, if you have that elder in your household who has lived throughout, what we talk about is the generational harm caused by slavery and how it's affected each generation. Sit down and hear those stories, document those stories, because at some point in the very near future, you want your children to know the true history and the legacy of your family. And that's the best source.
Ooh. Yes, thank you. That is what we call a testimony, a sermon. Thank you. Your story and the perseverance of your family continues to fuel me in my work. And I think what you said, I was off on mute saying, like, please call it what it is. And it is, for us who have been chosen. Sometimes it feels as a burden. And it makes me think about what Jermaine was saying with this empathy of, like, you have the empathy it takes to have to be the one to do this work. It is not easy work. So those of you, it's not something like it's going to be all cute and like, oh, girl, let me tell you what I found out about my grandpa. Like, it can get real. It can get real quick. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think that I think what we're showing here is that it's necessary work, and that there is power, as Kalia said, that can come out of that. And you talk so much about the power of the oral. And I know from knowing and hearing your story that, like, there's a, what do you call it? Verification in these, when you start to, like, especially when you move out of the activating the archives and art, and you're in the court seeking justice, we lose the validity of our records. Like you say, so beautiful is when you were saying how what your grandmother, what your mother was telling you, you could write it down. It's better than even a government written record, but that you can't take that in a court and they take it seriously. That there's points in your story that it's been taken more seriously when you've had an assistance from what people think of a more authoritative genealogist coming to validate and to, co-sign what you already know. And so, like, what is that? And I know that it's not easy to do this genealogical work on your own. So I wanted to see if you could speak to that for a little bit.
Well, there is, again, and I think, one thing that we haven't talked about is the structural and institutional racism that permeates our entire discussion this evening. And I say that to point to the fact that despite how much I've proven, how far I've come, how much I have, how much credibility the people who work with me have, we are still disinherited people. We are still disenfranchised and devalued people. And the point I'll use to coin that is, in my journey, I met, now my case also invokes Harvard University's creation of a scientific racism that says Blacks are a separate and lesser species deserving to be enslaved, how Harvard was involved in the promotion of slavery, and the scientists that they used to promote that racist mania. His children recently came forward in support of my recovering the daguerreotypes. And so without question, they're saying, I am Louis Agassiz's great-great-great-granddaughter, same lineage as me. It's embraced. Not one reporter, not one news media outlet questioned, prove you're Louis Agassiz's great-great-granddaughter. And so when I look at the paradox here, I'm saying, okay, no, I have this definitive proof, documents, government records, death records, cemetery records, all of this saying, and I still have to prove it. I still am being questioned. My validity, my accuracy, my credibility is questioned. But when Louis Agassiz's children come forward and say, we're the descendants, and they're embraced. They're not questioned, not one person. So it speaks to no matter how far I've come, no matter how much I've proven, I still don't have credibility. And someone can walk in the middle of things. And again, it speaks to the underpinning of racism and the structural and institutional racism in this country. And so when we get to court, when I present the oral history, that's an afterthought. That's a folk tale. That's a fairy tale. That has no value. But Harvard, in my conversation with a man who recently wrote a book about the daguerreotypes and speculated as to who these enslaved people were, what I said to him is, you're starting in the history and trying to trace to the future. I'm starting in the future, going back with a blueprint, with a roadmap. If you had had the information of my oral history, you would have arrived at the same conclusion. But no, you dismiss that as a folk tale or a fairy tale, not giving it any credibility, and you end up in the wrong spaces. So, yes, we are devalued as a people. Our history, what we say is our history, whatever we say will always be questioned. And again, if you look at the situation with the Agassiz family, not questioned. And it just points to the racism that we have to speak on, that we have to point out. This is the undercurrent of all that we're talking about here this evening.
Thank you for that, because that also, we want to keep it a buck, with people. It's this work, there's so much fruitfulness that can come from it, but there's a lot of frustration and dead ends and systematic things that have not been addressed that you will come up against when you take yourself on this journey. And it takes, generations of people. We may not see the justice in our lifetimes, but we pass it on, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality of it. And we have to just be real about those struggles that are still, persistent as we are doing this work. So I appreciate you bringing light to those. The other question we wanted to ask you was, how does your lawsuit offer one response to the issues surrounding stewardship of historical materials, documents of Black families? Like, how does your story illuminate and provide a response to that? Like, I think how you framed it when you start speaking earlier, like, who should own these things?
Yeah. And so this lawsuit, like I said earlier, embraces so much. One of the other things is dignity and ethical stewardship. Not just stewardship, but ethical stewardship. And so what my lawsuit points out to, again, is the disinheritance of Black people, the disenfranchisement, and I'll start with one point, and that's cultural property and the disparities that we face. What the point my lawsuit raises, and it invokes the Native American Grave Protections Act, it invokes UNESCO, it invokes the HERE Act, the Holocaust Expropriated Art and Recovery Act. There is legislation passed by the federal government to protect the cultural property of other aggrieved groups. There is nothing to protect the cultural property of enslaved people. And throughout the history of slavery to where we are today, our oral histories talk about, I can talk about Tulsa, I can talk about Henrietta Lacks. Our oral histories talk about Black cultures thriving. And then the government or policies or laws that come in and expropriate, destroy, burn down, take away Black cultural property, and Black success is destroyed in history. And when generations later, families come forward and say, we are an aggrieved group because of this government action. We want our property back. You burned down our church. You did this. How do we seek reciprocity? How do we recover? How do we have legal redress? There's nothing for us. For Native Americans, there is the Native American Grave Protection Act, where museums are required. Harvard is exempt because they have been holding relics of the Native American culture and not repatriating them as the law requires. But there's legislation that says, if you have wrongly taken or destroyed cultural property of this aggrieved group, you owe restitution. The HERE Act, recently passed in 2016 by President Obama, says, if you are a museum or a curator who is holding expropriated property of a victim of the Holocaust, you got to give it back. And that makes perfect sense. And all of it makes perfect sense. But I'm saying, where is the redress for people of color? We can't even get a formal apology, let alone legal redress for what has happened to us. But my case raises these points to point to the disparities in the unequal protection under the law that we have been the victim of for many, many years. And, it's important in that these questions have never been legally raised before. It's important that this case goes forward because it forces the courts to answer these questions. Who owns the rights to the violence of the past? Who owns property expropriated from slaves? The person who committed the crime or the victim of that crime? And so when this case is decided, it will either confirm or reaffirm one thing, that we have never had justice and never will, as it is promised in the Constitution, or that if we are successful in recovering the images, it will be the first time that a slave has challenged the court, in court, for their property that was wrongfully taken from them and recovered it back. So I'm very excited about that. But yes.
Thank you. Again, I'm just really inspired and moved by the work that you're doing. It's very pioneering. It's, really setting a stage for and showing people who are viewers that is this kind of work. It isn't just like, it can reach so many different places there's so much that can be done, and the pursuit of justice is one of those pursuits, one of those things that you can reach for. That may not be easy. We may not get the outcomes that we seek, but that you can, like you said, it's putting forth like that they have to reckon with those kind of questions, that we have to address this. And so I just really appreciate your story and the bravery and courage and the tenacity of your family to keep fighting. It's really, really moving. Arianne, we're gonna, I know we're running a little bit on time, but we're almost there. I think even though we may not have a lot of time towards the end for y'all to just go off with each other, but I think y'all could say whatever y'all been feeling or just with responses to close. But before we do, we have one other panelist to share. And I think, what's so, the ways in which your story shows the power of being able to steward those things, I think is really beautiful. And so I want you to talk about what it's meant that the materials created by your family were kept within your family, and where are they stored now? Like, what are your choices to digitize and share them? Shout outs to Internet Archive, shout outs to the, Los Angeles Public Library, or whatever, however you went about doing that. We were looking at it, Julie and I, we were like, this is amazing. It looks like so many editions of it. So it just would be lovely for you to speak about like what that has meant for you.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to really uplift what all the panelists shared, which was how important it is for us to hold on to our stories. And, with that, because we have so much like written history, I feel a deep, deep responsibility to make sure that it's available to the public, because it was a public newspaper documenting things that were happening in our community. So even though our family held on to those papers, first they were put in bound books, like based off of the year, and it was handed down in our family for over a century, so over 100 years. And so the decision that my dad and I made to make sure that everything was digitized was not really up to us, similar to you, Miss Tamara, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that, we have all these, it's, our stuff is like ephemera, it's letters. So I have all these letters from like the 60s and the 70s, where like aunties and uncles are, saying like, listen, there's this new microfiche, maybe we should do that with the newspaper, and then there's like conversations that I've had with elders in our family that were like, we knew this was important, but we weren't sure what to do with it. So seeing documentation from elders in our family that had passed on, showing an interest in wanting to make sure that this information was available to the public, kind of gave my dad and I like the green light to do this work. But the stories in these papers are like people's family. It's like ads looking for love. There's poetry. There's like international news and war correspondence. There's like, a new Black business opening up in downtown LA, and everybody needs to go try this new dish. When W. Du Bois came to LA to see if California was a place where Black people could thrive, the paper documented his whole tour and recounted all of his like speeches. Same with Booker T. Washington. So the paper, he also included people's emancipation stories. So folks that had migrated from the South and had come to LA, he would write what happened to them, where they went, who loved them, who they left behind, And so we felt like, how could we keep that from people who need to know, who they were, who they're becoming. So, yeah. Oh, we still have the physical papers. Part of our agreement with the California State Library was that they would digitize it for us. We're not sure where the physical ones will go yet, but all the research is there for folks for now.
Yes. And what I love that you demonstrate in your family story is that oftentimes there's this debate about, things needing to go into museums and things needing to go into public archives. And I think we're in a space where we're thinking about, non-extractive, more post-custodial models for things. And I think your family really demonstrates the power of that, and that we can be good stewards of our materials. And I think there's this thought that you put it in someone's private family and then it never sees the light of day. But oftentimes, like you said, your family has taken on this responsibility to share, that you feel a response. You said you didn't feel like you had a choice. And that shows like the power of like personal familiar stewardship. And I think that that's really, really powerful to demonstrate here. And then one other thing that I really love from with your story is like that so many people, and we've talked about that in our panel today. I think many other people's stories have talked about that. We've really uplifted the power of the oral storytelling. And oftentimes we have to do that because there's such a lack of physical documents. And what has it meant from you that you're on the other end of that spectrum in so many ways? I think it's even beautiful that you are noting the administrative behind the scenes of the family figuring out how they gonna take care of the thing, that becomes insightful to the stewards of the future in that family. But like, what does it mean for you to be at the other end of the spectrum and have an abundance of archival materials? How has that impacted the J.L. Edmonds Project?
Yeah, I love this question. It's similar to what I shared. There's not only this responsibility, but I see it as this beautiful gift. And it's something that doesn't just belong to me. So one thing that I think Jefferson, who was actually, formerly enslaved, he spent part of his life in Mississippi, migrated to California, worked on the trains to save enough money to bring his kids with him. He did all of this, which he talked about, so that we could build a community in LA, so that we didn't feel disconnected from our family, because one thing that we hear in so many of our stories is separation that's happened, and a lot of it having to do with slavery. And so I see it as a gift that I get to offer other folks. I mean, when we've done exhibitions or public programming, still to this day, people will email me and they're like, "Oh, I found my grandmother in your newspaper. Can we talk?" And I'm like, "Yes, let's talk next week." Like, I feel like it's like I get to reconnect with all the people that Jefferson saw as really important and valuable to our community. And I'm just continuing the work that he did, 120 years ago. And I've often collaborated with the great-great-grandkids of the people he was writing about, because, they found me because I put the call out. On Sundays, Jefferson and two other of his collaborators used to meet after church at 4:00, and they would read newspapers from the cities that they had migrated from and left from in the South. And he really focused on oral histories. Not everybody at the time could read. So he was like, "I'm still gonna make sure that you remember who you are, where your family is." They'll read letters that came back from their family. It became really political later, and they sent people to college and, did all kinds of, they fought back against the city, against oppressive, Jim Crow-esque laws coming into California. So they were very politically active, but at the core of this program was really to not leave anyone out. That if you couldn't read the newspaper, there was going to be someone there that could read it to you. So I just loved that he was thinking about everybody,
Yes. So you were saying, so some people are reaching out to you all. So what are you doing more with this project? Like, what is this project? And that can tie into the last question that I had for you too, around this intergenerational stewardship. I loved in reading your founder's story that you say that this conversation you have with your father, and he's like, "Remember when I told you were little, we were going to work on a project together," and that there was this each of us has done a little bit of the work to preserve the story. Now it's your turn. And we love to assign stuff. People can be like, "It's on you now." Okay.
Literally.
Also known as, I know it's cute how you probably put it in the founder story, but it's probably something more like, "All right, it's on you now."
Literally.
Yeah, so tell us more about what you all are doing in the project and your reign of stewarding.
Yeah, I think because we're in a very blessed position to have, a big part of Jefferson's life, before he moved to California, he was canvassing and working to make sure that, Black men at the time after the passing of the 13th and 14th Amendment were free and could vote, and so he was working really hard to make sure that that could happen. And so, we have court documents of him presenting to the US Congress and saying, talking about voter suppression. So we have different bits of his life from his childhood that he talked about all the way until the end of his life. And so my practice with the archive has totally shifted in the last couple of years. So I'm here in Ghana right now, and I'm mainly focusing on memory work that's connected to the things that storytelling and the things that are passed down. I feel like I'm now interested in the opposite. I was inundated with all this information, and now that the big phase of this work was to make it public and give it to the people who need it. And now I'm here learning more about how we remember when we don't feel like we're losing ourselves. What happens, what are the memory practices where we don't feel like we're drowning, or that someone's trying to rip something from us. And so in many ways, I feel like I've kind of gone back in time, maybe some of the pre-trauma. I mean, there's colonization, all kind of issues here. I'm not going to be like, it's perfect, but around the memory work here, I'm learning so much about how our practices around archiving and genealogy are tied to grief, tied to the pain of being separated from our family, from who we know we are. And so I'm spending, and when we're in these archives, we're spending all this time with the ghosts, and so being here, I'm just spending time with family, and asking the ancestors to show me how we used to remember before we were told that, we're not good enough.
Mm.
Well, I really wish, as you were talking, I really wish they had a reaction, the 100 emoji. I really need Zoom to start being, I just want to just be 100. I guess I could do that on my phone, but anyway.
I feel it.
And that's the kind of way that I think a lot about this work too, but I think that that's so beautiful with everything that you just said. Wow, I don't even want to commentary because it just leave it there. Just drop the mic. Let's just
come on, Mike.
Come on, Mike. The mic. Drop the mics. Take a step back. Don't touch it. I'm not even touching it. So we are over time, so we can't. I don't want to keep us too much longer, and so we ain't gonna go on all night because we could be talking about this till the sun comes up because we are those kind of people. But I would be remiss to not give you all the opportunity to talk amongst yourselves if there is. So maybe we can take a good, cute 5-10 minutes or so, and if there's just things that you want to respond to that you've heard, or just. And I'm gonna let y'all be Black, and I'm putting myself on mute, and I'm gonna let y'all. I ain't moderating this part. Y'all talk how you talk, but I will just keep time and maybe give y'all heads up in the chat. Okay, y'all, let's wrap it up, just so that way we can, make this a digestible enough video for our viewers of whatever time they tune in. But I just would love if you all have. Maybe y'all don't have much more to say today, but if there's anything anyone wants to say in response to what each other has shared, or other questions you all want to surface, this is a good time to do that. And maybe there might just have to be a part 2 at some other program, because we continue to be having, I feel like, the same conversation, just in different spaces that allow us to have it. So I'm going on mute. Y'all take the floor.
Thank you, Joyce, for moderating such a great conversation with everyone. I just wanted to add, a couple of things. One, I wanted to add something that Tamara touched on a little earlier when she said, it is so important to have the sit downs with your elders and start having these conversations and being able to access their memory and being able to apply it to your new knowledge and understanding of your family. And that's one thing I put into practice, right? So I went out and purchased myself a camera to make sure. And my grandmother's 88 years old, and I've been starting to have these oral histories kind of. So there's so many different ways of going about, preserving, right? So we guys start talking about in which ways and which medium. Kalia talked about being an artist and being able to express and learn about her history and then transform it into art, right? Me, I said, you know what? I'm going to let my grandmother do the talking. I'm going to record it. I'm going to make sure I have the right questions to ask and do my research, do the due diligence. But like recording the oral histories, I feel like is such a great tool that you can have and use to be able to preserve and keep passing it. That's the importance, right? To not just for it to stay with one generation, but to keep that legacy going, keep the knowledge, the information being passed down. And to add to Arianne, I believe that's I pronounced their name correctly. All right, awesome. So I think the work that you're doing is so amazing. It's so great. Especially the fact that, a lot of times people, I teach a lot of times how to access historical newspapers for genealogical work too. And especially accessing the obituaries. And I'm sure that the newspaper in your family has access to is definitely had so many obituaries that have such a wealth of information that can really draw out, the personalities of your ancestors. Sometimes, all we know is the occupation, right? But then it's like, wait a minute, now I understand. He said, this obituary said that he was a jokester. Now I understand why my grandmother, my grandfather, and it kind of, and it brings to life like, wow, this isn't just something that I thought that I just created on myself. No, this is actually a lineage of, makeshift comedians in my family, and it's just such a great tool to have access to. If anybody that's out there doing genealogical work, I know a lot of people have like family Bibles that hold their obituaries or some type of history or whatnot. But those historical newspapers, I'm telling you, if people just take the chance to look at those obituaries and try to find their family's history, they'll be amazed at what type of information you can access.
And they were spicy. Like Jefferson was talking about like this fancy dinner, and he was like, the chicken wasn't good, so y'all didn't miss nothing. I was like, oh, this in the newspaper? We got time for this? And it was like the old press where he had to put each letter and then do the thing. I was like, you got time to come for the chicken? So
absolutely.
There's still people, I do want to call out about the talking to elders. A lot of our work we would do, pre-COVID, we would do these like heritage days and like do live recordings and open scans for people to like have their family photos and things like that. And something that we would talk to a lot of the elders and the young people about was that for a lot of elders, it's hard to talk about what they've experienced. A lot of them don't want to. And, that's been the case for my family. That's the only reason I'm doing all this work, because I was like, what's going on? What y'all doing? And they're like, okay, we'll talk about it later. Because it's hard. It's rough. And so, I guess I would encourage everyone who's listening, and even all of us on the panel, to also think about how we support our elders, to give them opportunities to share and to be patient with them when they may not feel ready to. When we would do these programs, some elders would come forward and tell stories that, and they would tell me after I've never told anyone this. Like I would invite my grandparents, my sweet mama, she came to one, and I have people go off in pairs sometimes if it's too much. Her partner came over to me in one of the workshops I did, and he just told me like some of the most beautiful stories the sweet mama didn't even tell us. So, part of the responsibility is also holding space for our elders, because I think so many of them have been taught that their stories don't matter. And so, that's part of the work too.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Real quick, I feel like as a people, especially like going back to when slavery was at its peak. The goal was to tear us away from our culture and our heritage. And I think Miss Tamara said it. She said that they were successful. A lot of us don't know what part of Africa our ancestors come from. And so I think that it's really important to cherish the moments with our elders. As much as we want to get the information out of them, just like sit there with them, breathe, and cherish, because we're not going to have them forever. Death is inevitable, as much as it's unfortunate. So yeah, that's my piece.
And I will just wrap up by saying, I am amazed by what I've learned here this evening. I didn't expect this. Very impressed with everyone on this panel and the work you're doing, the work you've done. And, just listening to some of the things you're doing in the library and in your high school, I'm like, we need to have that in my community. So, you're an inspiration. You're an inspiration to me. You inspire me to think more globally about what needs to be done. But, when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, we still come back to not only embracing our family and loving them for who and what we are, but also recognizing the generational trauma and the generational harm caused by slavery. And I think that's something that many gloss over too easily. Slavery has a lasting impact, and we need to firstly acknowledge that, and then look at what we can do to address that. And I think the first, the first step is acknowledging, having these discussions, because the trauma is real. You talk about people who might not want to talk, maybe because of the trauma associated with their experiences. And that's never dealt with. That has never been addressed. And so slavery is still real in 2021. Even though we as people of color were not enslaved, we are still impacted by it. And that's hard for people to grasp, but it's only through education that we're going to move forward. And, and the one thing that, I have a picture of a Sankofa bird. That is and that is my inspiration. And there's so many different variations of what that term Sankofa means, but for me it means I can't move forward until I go back and recover what is rightfully mine. And that's my history. That's the legacy of my ancestors. And so so we can't move forward until we understand the legacy, the history of our ancestors. And, I keep that in a place where I see it daily, just as a reminder. And it inspires me. But again, I want to thank you all for imparting so much knowledge and so much information, and inspiring me, because again, I'm hearing things that I want to share with my community.
Yeah.
Likewise, Tamara, likewise.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any final words? Y'all feel like y'all got everybody said what they felt they needed to say? Everybody feel represented?
Yes.
Y'all's people just,
yeah.
I don't want y'all getting roasted in your obituaries about your chicken now. So.
Oh yeah.
Come on.
I'm telling you.
He was going in. He was like, the kids are too loud. They're on my lawn. I was like, what's going on? What's going on?
We are it's petty when they did the letterpress. I just, as a different level to setting tight. Talking about chicken, that's a commitment to.
I said, you fixed your fingers to give them that heat.
And to each things, and God was committed. But yes, we will not hold y'all any longer. Thank y'all so much for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, because and I hope that our viewers who are seeing all of these different they're going through the genealogy workshops, they're going through the archiving, going through the oral storytelling, that they can be inspired by your stories, because you need fuel to do this work. It is tireless. It is endless. This is what you see Arianne's face was like, okay, girl, it's time for you to tap in now. I'm tapping out. It's intergenerational. You got to pass this work on down. And so I hope that these stories inspire you all to keep going. Because as Tamara said, like we have to reclaim what was left behind in order to really move forward. And I trust that we are all finding our way forward, and that through reclaiming and like really just uncovering and celebrating our legacies, that we got this, that we will make our ways forward. I trust that. And so I look forward to people being able to see you all's stories. I'm so excited for them. I'm so excited to rewatch this myself and not be worried about time, and just be able to just enjoy what y'all have been sharing. I'm glad that it's inspiring that, again, we have this community of practice, that we come together and you're here to share your story, but that you get the inspiration that you need to continue to do the work. And so I'm glad that was a reciprocal exchange today. Thank y'all so much for y'all's time. May we all stay safe, healthy, and, in good spirits. And until next time, peace and love, everyone.
Thank you, Joy.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this program of The Black Family, United by History, Restored by Storytelling. Special shout out to New York Life and our production team for bringing this project to life. Once again, we encourage you to watch the rest of the videos in this series to learn more about oral storytelling, genealogy, and familial archiving. Once you view all of the videos, you could receive a certificate as a family historian from ASALH. Be sure to subscribe to ASALH TV, ASALH's YouTube channel, and check out the YouTube description as well as the website for more information on this project.